Hello students, welcome back to my channel. I am Dr. Vidya Patil, working as Assistant Professor of English at Government First Grade Women's College, Bidar. Today's video is another video in the series related to environmental science. Environmental science is a compulsory subject which has been prescribed by most universities. So come friends, let us try to understand some more new concepts of environmental science. So friends, in the previous video, we have discussed about the structure and function of the ecosystem. Today, let us continue the same thing further and understand what is energy flow in the ecosystem. We have already seen that how there are different trophic levels and how food is eaten by animals from the different trophic levels. With this and along with this, energy flow also takes place in the ecosystem. Let us understand this in some more detail. As you all know that it is the sun which supports all living forms on earth. It is because of the sun that all the ecosystems can exist on planet earth. The plants use the solar energy to convert it into food and release chemical energy. So without the sun, there cannot be any flow of energy in our ecosystem. Another concept which we need to understand here is trophic levels. What are trophic levels? Trophic levels are different stages of feeding positions in a food chain. That is, in a food chain, at every stage, you find a particular group of living organisms which are known as a trophic level. For example, at one of the trophic levels, you will find only primary producers. That is, those organisms which can produce their own food. At another trophic level, you will find consumers. So consumers will be all the organisms who depend on the plants and other animals for food. So in this way, each trophic level will consist of living organisms of the same type. Now, energy flows through the ecosystem from one trophic level to the other. The energy flows in only one direction. It is passed down from the organisms of one trophic level to the next trophic level. From the diagram which you can see on your screen, it is very obvious as to how the producers, that is plants, become the source of food and energy for the primary consumers, who in turn become the source of food and energy to the secondary consumers and in turn to the tertiary consumers. So in this way, energy flows in a single direction and from one trophic level to the other. Now, let us try to understand what are food chains. In any ecosystem, one organism consumes the other organism for food. This is known as a food chain. Food chain can be scientifically defined as a chain of organisms existing in any natural community through which energy is transferred. Therefore, food chains are nothing but a set of organisms which pass energy from one trophic level to the other. As a consequence of the loss of energy at each trophic level, it can support fewer organisms. So, a food chain is nothing but one trophic level transferring food and energy to the next trophic level. Organisms in a food chain are organized under different groups known as trophic levels. Most of the food chains have only 4 or 5 trophic levels. This is because there is not much energy left at the higher trophic level to support organisms for a 6th or 7th trophic level. So generally, a food chain will have 4 or 5 trophic levels. Now let us see which are the different trophic levels. The first trophic level or the basis of any food chain will always be the producers. A food chain begins with a producer. These producers are basically plants. They are also known as autotrophs. They form the basis of any food chain. Plants are also called producers because they produce their own food through photosynthesis. Next, the next level of trophic levels consist of consumers. These consumers are those organisms which depend on other organisms for food. Animals are called consumers because they depend on plants or on other animals to get food and energy. These consumers are divided into different types. The second trophic level consists of primary consumers. Primary consumers eat the producers, that is, those animals which eat plants for food are known as primary consumers. They are also known as herbivores. Some examples are deer, turtle, and some birds. The third trophic level consists of secondary consumers. Secondary consumers eat plants as well as other herbivores. Those animals which eat other animals are known as carnivores, and those animals which eat both plants and animals are known as omnivores. So, secondary consumers consist of carnivores and omnivores, those living organisms which feed on other plants and animals. The fourth trophic level consists of the tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers are those animals which eat the carnivores. These animals, they are at the top of the food chain. They have they are very stable, and they are generally have the smallest biomass. That is, their number is quite less. The fifth trophic level consists of the quaternary consumers. Quaternary consumers are often called as the top predators within the environment. They eat the tertiary consumers. Among the quaternary consumers, man is considered to be the topmost predator because no other animals eat humans. Now from this chart, you will easily get an idea of how the trophic level, different trophic levels exist in a terrestrial ecosystem as well as in an aquatic ecosystem. At the lowest level, you have the producers, that is plants who produce food. At the second trophic level, you have primary consumers, those living organisms which eat the plants. At the third trophic level, you have the secondary consumers who eat other living organisms, which may be both plants and animals. Then at the fourth trophic level, you have the tertiary consumers who eat the carnivores or the animal secondary consumers. And then you have the topmost predators, which are the quaternary consumers. Now, along with these different trophic levels, we have another group of organisms who form a very important link in the food chain. They are the decomposers. They may not always be shown or pictured in a food chain, but they play a very important role in completing the food chain. These decomposers are those organisms which break down dead organic materials and wastes. Most the common examples are fungi and bacteria. They convert these dead living organisms into nutrients. Now, this diagrammatical representation of the food chain will help you understand the food chain much more easily. So, you can see that using the solar energy, plants prepare food. So, they are known as producers. Then you have small insects like a grasshopper which feeds on these plants, who are known as the primary consumers. Then you have some other animals such as the frog which eats the grasshopper for food and is known as the secondary consumer. Next you have a snake which eats the frog for food, and so the snake is known as the tertiary consumer. Next you have a hawk which eats the snake, and so the hawk becomes the quaternary consumer. After all these different trophic levels, you have the decomposers, that is the fungi and bacteria, who decompose all these different dead living organisms and wastes and convert them into nutrients. These nutrients become a part of the soil, and then plants again use these nutrients from the soil to prepare food. This is how the food chain gets completed. So dear students, I am sure you may now have got a clear idea about what is a food chain. The next concept which we need to understand is the food web. Now, food chain is linear in nature, and so it passes from one organism to the other. The word web means a network. So a food web can be defined as a network of interconnected food chains. That means a food chain cannot stand isolated in an ecosystem. That is, you cannot find a single many different strains of food chains in the ecosystem. One food source can be a part of many different food chains. Therefore, a food web consists of food chains of different types in an ecosystem. It is very necessary to know that each living thing in an ecosystem is a part of multiple food chains. So what you need to understand here, students, is that food web is nothing but a collection of many different food chains which are overlapping over each other. Now this diagram, I think, will clearly represent what exactly a food web is. Now plants, which are the source of food, can be a source of food for a goat, can also be a source of food for the rabbit, and can be a source of food for the rat or mouse. So these different animals which make the plants their source of food then go on to form different food chains, and all these different food chains then get interconnected. So when so many different food chains get interconnected and overlap each other, it is known as a food web. Plants are the foundations for all the ecosystems and for all the food chains. It is the plants which sustain life. They do this by providing us food and nourishment, and also by providing us oxygen, which is most essential for the survival of all living organisms. The food web provides stability to the ecosystem. It helps in maintaining the balance in the ecosystem. Now, you have already seen that tertiary consumers are eaten by the quaternary consumers. So, each food chain ends with a top predator, that is an animal which has no other natural enemies or which is not eaten by any other animal. Generally, human beings are an important part of these food webs because we are at the top of every food web, since there is no other animal which eats us. That means humans are the topmost predators. Now, I'm sure that these main concepts are clear to you. So, a food chain describes the passage of energy between one trophic level to the other. A food web is a set of connected and overlapping food chains. And food webs may also be overlapping each other. So, food chains and food webs. These are two important concepts which you should be very clear about. Let us now try to understand what is an ecological pyramid. Ecological pyramid is a graphical representation which shows the number of organisms, biomass, and productivity at each trophic level. So, it is also known as an energy pyramid. So, from an ecological pyramid, it will be easy for us to understand how the energy flows from one trophic level to the other. Now, this is an example of an energy pyramid or an ecological pyramid. Here you can see that there are 4 different trophic levels which have been represented. The lowermost trophic level is that of the producers, and the uppermost trophic level shows the tertiary consumers. The producers produce the food and they have 100% of energy with them. When these producers are eaten by the primary consumers, they get only 10% of the energy because the remaining energy has been used by the plants for their own needs. The primary consumers again use this energy for their personal needs, for their growth, for their movement and other things. And when the secondary consumers eat the primary consumers, they get only 10% of the energy, that is only 1% of the energy reaches the third trophic level where the secondary consumers reside. The secondary consumers again use most of the energy for their personal needs, and the energy which is transferred to the next trophic level is only 10% of that energy. So the animals living at the topmost trophic level get only 0.1% of the energy which had been produced at the bottommost trophic level. So this shows how energy has transferred from the lowest trophic level to the topmost trophic level. You can see that the energy is maximum at the lowest level and becomes minimum at the topmost level. So energy pyramid represents how much amount of energy is used and how much is lost and how much is transferred at each trophic level. The energy pyramid is sometimes also called as the trophic pyramid or the ecological pyramid. It is useful to quantify the amount of energy which is being transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level. Energy decreases as we move through different trophic levels from the bottom to the top of the pyramid. Thus, the energy pyramid is always upward. That is, the energy flows in only one direction. It is always flowing from the bottom to the top, never from the top to the bottom. this is something which is very important, and you need to remember that the energy flow always takes place from the bottom of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid. Also, in a food chain, the energy flow always follows the 10% law, which I just mentioned when I was explaining the pyramid. According to this law, only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to the other. The remaining energy is used by the organisms for their own needs. Now, this is a pyramid of energy. Here you can see that the producers, which are at the bottommost level, produce, if for example, have 10,000 kilocalories of energy. When they reach the second trophic level, only 10% of this energy reaches there, and so they have only 1,000 kilocalories of energy. The third trophic level, where the secondary consumers reside, get only 10% of the previous trophic level and have only 100 kilocalories of energy. Now the topmost level, where the tertiary consumers reside, again get only 10% of the previous level and have only 10 kilocalories. So the flow energy becomes less as we go to the topmost level of the pyramid. The energy flow is the amount of energy that moves along the food chain. This energy flow is also known as the calorific flow. So the energy flow in the ecosystem is very important to maintain an ecological balance. Now the producers, that is the plants, synthesize food by the process of photosynthesis. A part of that energy gets stored within the plants. The remaining energy is utilized by the plants for their own growth and development. This stored energy is transferred to the primary consumers when they feed on the producers. So when the primary consumers eat the plants, the food which they get also carries or brings along with it the energy which is required. This energy is further passed on to the secondary consumers when they feed on the primary consumers. So what happens is that again, when the secondary consumers eat the primary consumers, the food which they get also brings along with it the energy. The 10% law of energy states that when energy is passed from one trophic level to another, only 10% of the energy gets passed to the next level. Now, again, this diagram will help you understand this better. So, producers, which are the plants, use the energy from the sun to prepare their own food. This is how they convert the solar energy into chemical energy. If the producers have 10,000 kilocalories of energy, by the time it reaches the next trophic level, it is reduced to only 10% of its original energy, and so it will have 1,000 kilocalories. Again, only 10% of this energy is transferred to the next trophic level and you have 100 kilocalories. Again, when it is transferred to the next trophic level, only 10% of the energy gets transferred and you will have 10 kilocalories at the uppermost level. So, students, I would like to just revise what are the important concepts which we understood during this video. So students, in today's video, we have understood what is a food chain, what is a food web, and what is an energy pyramid or an ecological pyramid. So you know now that a food chain is a continuous or a unidirectional flow of food from one level to the next. A food web is a collection of interconnected and overlapping food chains. And the ecological pyramid or the energy pyramid represents the flow of energy from one trophic level to the other. This flow of energy generally follows the 10% law. So I hope these concepts are now very clear to you. So if you have understood and liked this video, then please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching my video.